Well, if I were sitting where you are, the first thing I'd want to know is why in the world should I think contrary to what my human nature suggests? And there are a lot of reasons for that. Over the years, I've been able to help clients with a lot of different issues, some business, some professional, some personal. I actually helped a client who had an ADHD dyslexic child develop a program for helping them learn. So it's got a broad array of issues. But today we're going to focus on just one opportunity for using this to your advantage. And it actually came from Kathy Sexton's program last month, in which she said that her best customers were the ones that found her. And she repeated that several times. And as I looked around the audience, people were going, oh yeah, I've been there, done that. So what we're going to talk about today is how to stop chasing opportunities and start attracting them. And we all know what the pain is of spending a lot of time and energy and money pursuing opportunities and then just at the last moment have it slip away from us. So we're going to talk about how to attract opportunities and avoid that kind of pain. And one of the keys to attracting opportunities is to get people to say things about you like, you don't think like other people do. You look at the world differently than other people do. You see things other people don't see. And yet what you say makes perfect sense. In essence, what they're saying is that you've mastered the art of counterintuitive thinking, to thinking contrary to what our human nature suggests. The key is getting to thinking counterintuitively, and as I said, counterintuitive thinking is a way of thinking that's contrary to what our human nature suggests. And I realize that's a little vague, but as we get into the program, I think you'll see how that develops and how it works and why it works to your advantage. But for now, what I want you to realize is that when people view you as being able to see things that other people don't see, they're crediting you with the wisdom that few possess. And with wisdom comes influence, and with influence comes opportunity. And so being able to get people to see you in that light is a critical element in being able to use this counterintuitive thinking to your advantage to attract opportunities. So there are really 7 steps to developing this skill of counterintuitive thinking. And the first one is contributory negligence. And here what we're talking about is understanding that we contribute to every problem that we face and being willing to acknowledge that. Because our human nature is that when we make a mistake, we try to put a spin on it so we don't look quite as stupid as we really are in that moment, right? But what happens when we admit our mistake and are willing to acknowledge it, embrace it, number one, we see a lot more opportunities to solve the problem. Because if Kurt and I are at odds here, and I think that he's the problem, the number of options that I see for solving the problem are pretty limited. But if I acknowledge first what I'm doing that's contributing to that, it opens the door to a lot more possible solutions, and those are things that I can control. I can't control Kurt's behavior, but I can control mine, right? So once I identify what I'm doing that's contributing to the problem, I can make a change fairly quickly and resolve issues very quickly. The other thing is that it breaks down defenses very quickly. So if Kurt and I are at odds and it escalates, then walls of defense are being built up between us. But if I acknowledge my problem, I say to Kurt, I realize that, that hurt when I said that. And I should have said, and what I intended to say was this. Then, no, thanks. That what I intended to say was this. Odds are he's going to say, I could have handled it better myself. And the walls of defense go down, and now we're both open and more receptive to new ideas and possible solutions. So that's the first step. The second step is understanding that persuasion is a myth. We really can't persuade anyone of anything. And you know this yourself. You've had people try to persuade you of things that are contrary to what you believe or what your experience has been. And how often are they successful doing that? Never, right? You also, on the other side of the coin, know how frustrating it is when that dimwit next to you can't see the logic of your argument, right? How frustrating that can really be. So the reality is we can't persuade anyone of anything. What we can do is shine a light on new information and frame that information within the context of experiences they've already had. And the persuasion really is them tapping into their own experiences to validate your message. And when they do that, they end up persuading themselves. So another key element is learning to do that. And the best way to do that is, instead of telling people things, is to ask them questions. And our friend Larry Lukens is going to do a program on asking questions next month, I believe, isn't it? April? In April. So tune in for that one. But asking questions rather than stating, because statements, again, build defenses. The third step is learning to suspend judgment. And again, our natural tendency is to judge things as good or bad, right or wrong. And whenever we do that, we create bias in our thinking. And that bias limits the potential opportunities that we have for resolving whatever problem that we're facing. But when we accept things as they are and don't judge them as good or bad, it again opens the door to a lot of possible solutions that we might not otherwise have seen. And in doing that, we make it much easier for ourselves and whomever we're dealing with to come to that point. And again, we avoid defensiveness, because if we're not judging another one person's values or their behaviors or their characters, then we're not locking ourselves into that bias. So we avoid those problems as well. And I think you'll see this as a consistent theme throughout these steps, is that we are avoiding creating resistance. We're avoiding creating problems for ourselves when we go through these steps, which are counterintuitive, contrary to our human nature. The fourth element, then, is seeing similarities. And I don't remember where I saw this statistic. I wish I'd made note of it at the time, but I read one time where 95% of us see differences in a given situation, and only 5% of the population sees similarities. Now imagine what a leg up that is for you if you can see the similarities in a given situation, and things that will contribute to you being able to see things that other people can't see, and create this element of becoming valuable to them and having great influence in creating opportunities because you're seeing those things. And one of the simplest ways to do this is to really tap into our subconscious mind. Our subconscious has the ability to solve problems. And you've all had this experience where you've had a problem, you've been wrestling with it all day. At the end of the day, it still isn't resolved. You're exhausted, you go to bed. You're thinking, man, I just got to come up with an answer for this. And the next morning in the shower, pop, right into your mind. Simple, inexpensive, easy to implement solution. You go, why didn't I think of that before? Well, that's the subconscious mind working on that. And what you can do is, when you have a problem like that, you can look for the similarity with other problems that you've had. And in doing so, you can come up with solutions to problems that you didn't seem like they're different, but they're really not. And you can see those similarities. And one of the things that I do in that regard is that I use that similarity then to create messages so that I can share those ideas with people in a way that makes them memorable. So I read Brian Greene's Fabric of the Cosmos. And in there, he talked about entropy, the second law of thermodynamics, and he used an ice cube example, how it takes a certain amount of pressure to maintain that state of an ice cube. I use that in leadership programs to teach managers how to balance the pressure in the system, and that's one of their primary responsibilities in their management role. So when things are really hectic, they're extracting information or items from that schedule to take some of the pressure off, and in slow times, inserting projects that have value so that they maintain a level of focus and good work habits throughout that process. So that's seeing similarities. The next one is the contrarian mindset. Being able to develop a mindset that helps people with groupthink. So when everybody's euphoric, you're the one that has to be the voice of reason that says, well, wait a minute, what about this? And you're highlighting the risk that they're facing. So again, you're being a contrarian and it's counterintuitive thinking. When everybody's despondent, when things didn't go as expected and everybody's really disappointed and in the dumps about it, you're the voice of reason that says, okay, what did we learn from this and how are we going to move forward with it? Every step of the way that we do this, we become more and more valuable to the people around us. After the contrarian mindset, the next thing we want to do is develop an eclectic education. And this is really essential because if you really want to distinguish yourself and you want to create opportunities for yourself, you have to have knowledge about things that are outside your area of discipline. And when you are able to do that, you make connections with people more readily and you gain a lot of credibility. When I did an expanded version of this program a few years ago, there was a gentleman sitting about where Stephen is there, and I was using the ice cube example from the Brian Greene's Fabric of the Cosmos, and this guy's face just lit up. And after the program, he couldn't wait to come up and talk to me, and he's telling me about the other states that this could be, and he's giving me the names of books or the titles of books that I can go and read and expand my knowledge. He was a biochemist. So here I had this credibility and this connection with this biochemist that I would never have had if I hadn't read things outside my discipline. Okay? So that's counterintuitive as well, because we tend to want to specialize. And then finally, we want to be able to evaluate opportunities, because as you master this concept of counterintuitive thinking, as you develop the practice and the habit of doing that and become more and more valuable to people, opportunities will come to you at a rate that you never envisioned. And it'll be overwhelming at times, trying to decide which ones to avail yourself of and which to let go. So there's a series of questions you can ask yourself when opportunity presents itself that's intriguing. You can ask questions like, well, what's really involved in the process of accomplishing this? Are those things I really want to do? Am I committed enough to do some of the things that may not be as much fun as I would like them to be, but can I do that? What impact is it going to have on my family? You know, how do I recover if it doesn't work? Do I have the wherewithal to do that? So these are the kinds of questions that will help you evaluate opportunities, decide which ones to take advantage of. Now, with that, I'm going to ask, are there any questions? Well, and you know, to your point, and I know we share this, that you know, there are people that we need to say no to, that they really, their values, their behaviors, their characteristics are not aligned with ours. And in those situations, neither they or we will be successful, and consequently, it just doesn't make sense to even get started with it. Yeah. That's great. That's great. Yeah, interesting story aside on that. I did this program for a group, Gateway Association of Payroll Professionals, and there was a woman in the audience that raised her hand. She said, Dale, I have done, on that particular step, I've done everything you said. You know, I was the contrarian, and it did not make me very popular, you know, so how do I deal with that? And I said, well, if you're really getting a lot of pushback, simply say, help me understand. Help me understand. Help me see what I'm missing, you know. And I got an email from her, a LinkedIn email from her the other day, and said, oh, my friend and I are still using that. Help me understand. She said, it just works beautifully every time. So I'll tell you the one step that gets the biggest pushback that people go, I really don't want to do that, is the eclectic education one. Because our natural tendency is to study and read and pursue things that have a great deal of interest for it. And initially, with the eclectic education, you have to set aside time to learn about things that on the surface may not interest you. And my suggestion to people for that is just set aside 15 minutes a day. To Scott's point earlier, just set aside 15 minutes a day and do that. And that will enable you to that. And tie it to step 4 where you're seeing similarities. So before you start on that, ask yourself, what am I going to see here that doesn't, that's similar to what I already know and already do? And that then makes it more interesting, because as you make those discoveries, now you want to learn more about a broad variety of other things. And I'm out of time here, but I want to leave one last thought with you in terms of what this will do for you. For me, it's generated so many opportunities that I view the world as a big playground, and I haven't played with all the toys yet. And that's my wish for you, that you find a world filled with so many toys that you haven't played with, so many that you haven't even imagined, and you get to pick and choose which ones you want to play with. That's my wish for you.
Thank you, Dave.